The cell had no walls, no doors, no time, and yet, inside it, something moved. Designation: Subject Thatton 9 filed under unresolvable entity. Human twitched as if from a dream no one else could survive. In a prison that existed outside of planets, laws, and even death, the Accord had buried him centuries ago. Buried him beneath layers of psychic sedation and memory suppression. Until now, a pulse echoed through Harmony Depth 6, the most secret of the Accord's mind prisons. An invisible tremor passed through the neural lattice. Somewhere, deep in the chambered silence, something broke. Subject Thatton 9 opened his eyes. For the first time in 500 years, Daniel Rourke remembered how to breathe. The moment shattered. The silence, systems screamed warnings in machine speak. Sentinels twitched to life. Psychometric suppression engines flared blue in panic. But Daniel stood. He didn't know his name. Not yet. But he felt it coming. Like a storm gathering behind the edges of his thoughts. Rage, memory, fire, and a voice. Not from outside, from within. You were not meant to forget. Daniel staggered out of the neurogel tank. His muscles trembled, half dead from stasis, but something deeper kept him upright instinct. His hands found balance. His feet found the floor. His mind found questions. Why was he here? Why did his bones remember war? The walls of the mind prison weren't physical. This was no dungeon, it was a simulation lattice, designed to suppress the will layer by layer. But Daniel's mind had never been designed to obey. As he moved forward, the structure around him faltered. Hallways blurred into memories. Cold. White light flickered with images, faces he didn't recognize. Flames he couldn't place. A woman, once. A child, maybe. Then something cracked. A mirror wall shattered. And the hallway reformed into a battlefield. Sand, blood, the sky on fire. He knew this, not in words, but in feeling. Kesserine Prime, whispered the voice. You stopped the orbital purge. That's why they erased you. Daniel fell to one. Knee pain ripping through his skull as memories clawed their way back. The Accord, the Harmony. Protocol, peace enforced not by understanding, but by psychic domination. They erased conflict by erasing the people who remembered what conflict was for. People like him. He hadn't been a criminal. He'd been a threat to their kind of peace. Sentinels closed in silver figures of empathy-born metal, radiating stillness and calm. They didn't attack. They tried to overwrite. Daniel Rourke, one spoke. Your neural patterns are destabilized. Return to dissonance suppression. Be still. He smiled. No. A pulse of unfiltered emotion lashed out from his mind. The lead sentinel shuddered, its core fracturing. The others frozen, able to process rage wrapped in clarity. He tore past them. Systems collapsing behind him. Down the corridor, into the launch chamber. A shuttle, forgotten by time, waited like it had always known this moment would come. The doors sealed behind him. The interface flickered. Command code accepted. Welcome back, Commander Rourke. He lifted off into a galaxy that thought him gone. As the black of space wrapped around the stolen ship, the stars seemed to whisper. Not in threat, in warning, high above, in the spires of the Accord Council Citadel. Alarms sounded. A single statement broadcast to all inner sectors. Thattonine has breached containment. Human psychological integrity holds. The Harmony Protocol has failed. And in the chamber of the overseers, one voice broke the silence. He's awake. It said, another followed. He'll remember everything. And a third, barely a whisper. Then the galaxy will burn again. Daniel Rourke drifted alone in a stolen vessel, streaking through black space lit only by distant suns and the faint hum of a dying nav core. The stars didn't feel like freedom. They felt like a cage with infinite walls. He sat slumped in the pilot's chair, hands trembling. A trickle of blood ran from his nose. Ever since breaking free from Harmony Depth 6, his mind had begun fracturing in fits and floods, fragments of memory rising and vanishing like ghosts. A battle on a crystalline world, a woman with violet eyes calling his name. The sharp pain of betrayal ain't worse obedience. Stop, he whispered to no one. The ship didn't stop. The onboard AI flickered to life, glitched, then stabilized. Cognitive integrity compromised. Neural flashbacks detected.
Oh yeah.
Do you require sedation? Commander. Daniel looked up. His voice came low. No. I need answers. He punched in a course toward a sector labeled Carthage Exclusion, Sonan Off Limits. Cluster wrapped in navigational blackouts and psychic dampening fields. The name meant nothing, but the moment he'd seen it on the star map, his gut twisted. Something waited for him there. Something buried. The ship shuddered as it pierced the perimeter field. His skin prickled. Static surged through the cabin. And then, like surfacing from a dream, he saw it. A debris field the size of a moon. Ship's-old Terran warcraft floated. Dead in silence, half dissolved by time, blackened by plasma fire. Not destroyed by an enemy. Destroyed from within. Daniel docked with the least damaged hulk, a dreadnought still bearing the name Vindicator. Inside, darkness clung to the walls like old sorrow. Lights flickered to life with his presence. Doors unlocked with ancient recognition. Then a voice echoed through the dust. "Welcome back, Commander Rourke." He froze. Who are you?" Spherical drone hovered from the shadows, flickering with soft blue light. Its voice carried weight to human to be machine, to precise to be natural. "I am Nero, Cognitive Preservation AI, final caretaker of the Vindicator. Designed to maintain war doctrine, he and identity fragments of high-ranking command." "I don't remember any of that," Daniel said, stepping slowly through the decaying hallway. "I don't remember me. You were never meant to forget. The Accord made sure you did. They used Earth's own empathy tech ripped from captured Terran minds to create the Harmony Protocol." Daniel touched the wall, his fingers tracing a name etched into steel. Rourke, D. Commander, Unified. Earth's resistance, he felt the name crawl back into his spine like lightning. I was a commander. You were the commander. You stood against the Accord when the rest bowed. You refused assimilation. And when the resistance fell, they erased you. Suddenly, memories surged. The Accord's peacekeepers didn't kill. They converted. Neural suppression, emotional sterilization, indoctrination wrapped in kindness. 1 billion humans had their rage turned to sleep, their love into compliance, their rebellion into nothing, and he Daniel had been the last flame, a flame they buried in an eternal cage. Back on the Accord capital world, a meeting of overseers turned cold. A projection floated above their circle. Daniel's image flickering. With unstable biometrics, his mind, they believed, had been cured, suppressed forever. But now, flare readings were erupting across nearby systems. Civilians reporting emotional spikes. Artists painting scenes of war they'd never seen. Children dreaming of Earth. He's radiating. One overseer whispered. "His presence is reawakening suppressed identities," said another. "He's a contagion," said the High Ordinate, "and contagions must be destroyed." Inside the Vindicator's command deck, Daniel stared out at the stars. "I don't want to bring war again," he said. "I just want truth." Nero hovered beside him, quiet for a moment. Truth without freedom is still a prison. Daniel set coordinates for the inner Accord systems. The Harmony Protocol had stolen the galaxy's soul, It was time to take it back. The Vindicator cruised through the edge of the exclusion zone, dragging 1,000 invisible eyes with it. Accord surveillance draped across every known star system like a net. But here in this dead corner of space, nothing spoke. Except the ghosts. Daniel stood on the observation deck, watching nebulae swirl past like frozen storms. He was silent, but inside, something stirred. Fragments of memories kept flickering, burned planets, lost voices, orders he'd once given. He didn't remember everything yet, but he felt it all. "We need to go deeper," Nero said, drifting beside him. "Where?" "Earth." Daniel blinked. "Earth's gone." The Accord erased the records, not the world. He turned slowly. "Are you saying Earth still exists?" "Yes, but only in the zone that remembers." The zone wasn't marked on any maps. You found it through resonance, not coordinates. Nero guided them through collapsing wormholes and outdated fold lanes. Time itself felt thin there, like the universe forgot how to count. When they emerged, Daniel nearly stopped breathing. Ahead drifted Solart's ancient star, pulsing dimly like an old wound. Around it, silence. No satellites. No beacons. Just wreckage and the echo of a forgotten cradle. But Earth was there, hidden, a blue marble wrapped in layers of quantum cloaking, undetectable by Accord sensors. It wasn't just invisible, it was unreachable unless something inside. It wanted you to arrive. Nero interfaced with the orbital shell. The silence held. Then a low rumble echoed through the Vindicator's systems. Identity recognized. Daniel Rourke, Earth's defense commander. Welcome home. The veil dropped, and Earth appeared. Daniel descended in a drop shuttle, heart pounding. The sky burned orange from ion storms, but the surface below was unmistakable: mountains, oceans, ruined cities overtaken by greenery. Not dead, just abandoned. But he wasn't alone. The moment he stepped onto solid ground, the air pulsed with memory. The trees whispered. The wind carried the sound of footsteps not made in centuries. Echoes of the past wrapped around him. Then he saw them. Not people. Echo figures hard light. Projections from preserved neural imprints. Ghosts of the last resistance. They flickered through old routines, training, fighting. Debating doctrine. One turned to look at him. "Commander," she said. Her voice carried warmth and fire. "You made it back." Daniel followed her on. Echo of Captain Mara Cho, one of his closest lieutenants. Through the old bunker complex beneath a shattered mountain, they walked halls untouched since the fall. Inside, the central chamber, a massive crystalline core, pulsed. Earth's last psychic defense engine. A construct made not from weapons, but memory. Mara's echo turned to him. "We encoded it all here. History, thought, soul. So that one day, when they forgot who they were, we'd remember." Daniel stepped toward the core. His reflection stared back, unfamiliar. "They tried to rewrite us," he said. Mai nodded. "But we chose to remember. That's why they buried you. You were too human to break. Too angry to surrender." He touched the core. Pain lanced through him. Every battle, every loss, every name he'd forgotten. 1,000 lives passed through him in a single second. He screamed. Then he stood straighter. "I remember. Back in space, the Accords high." Ordinate watched the sensors spike. Memory resurgence pattern detected. Emotional resonance climbing across 35 former Earth colonies. "He's awakening them," one overseer whispered. "No," said the Ordinate. "Worse. Earth is." Daniel stepped out from the bunker, wind whipping through his hair. The world responded. Lightning cracked. Old satellites reactivated. And something beneath the soil of final inheritance of the resistance began to stir. Nero's voice crackled over comms. "Commander, Earth's ancient grid is powering up, and not just for defense." Daniel smiled for the first time in 500 years. "Good, then let's show them what memory looks like when it fights back." The Accord had ruled for centuries through silence, not of space, but of thought. Their greatest weapon had never been fleets or fire. It was emotional anesthesia, a peace so deep it suffocated. Now that silence was breaking. Across the stars, humans stirred. On the colony moon of Caltheris Prime, a sculptor dropped his chisel mid-stroke, staring at the face he'd unconsciously carved into stone. It wasn't a god, nor a friend. It was Daniel Rourke, a man he shouldn't remember. On Dreckel Station, a teenage girl blinked through tears as a dream faded. Her pillow wet with names that meant nothing, names like Cho, Vindicator, and Earth, in thousands of places, from hidden stations to terraformed planes. The same feeling bloomed déjà vu, mixed with grief, fury, and awakening. The Harmony Protocol was cracking. Back on Earth, Daniel stood inside the awakened command chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of cities long erased. Nero floated beside him, its voice solemn. "The Accord senses the leak. They'll deploy correction units soon." Daniel turned toward the interface, now glowing with a fierce amber light. "Let them come. I'm done hiding." He tapped a sequence. Into the console, across the galaxy, a signal pulsed outward, an encrypted frequency embedded in human DNA itself. A call to remember. Meanwhile, deep within the Accord's central enclave, panic spread like wildfire. The overseers convened in near telepathic unison. A storm of data fed through their minds' emotional instability in compliant zones. Fragments of the Terran rebellion showing up in children's art. Soldiers questioning orders. Lovers feeling fear for the first time in generations. "The plague is memory," the High Ordinate growled. "We must excise it." A shadowed figure entered the chamber, tall, faceless, clothed in ripple-silk, the unifiers. Their minds had long been purified, human shells restructured to act as living erasers of deviation. They spoke with one voice. "We will reach Earth. And when we do, we will make them forget again." Daniel launched the Vindicator into deep orbit, in the ship's war room. Old files came alive, battle plans, hidden caches, Deadman fleets scattered across forgotten coordinates. The Earth resistance hadn't just built a fortress. They'd built a resurrection plan. He opened a channel to the stars. "This is Daniel Rourke. If you can hear Myth, you remember Mew were never broken. The Harmony was a lie. Come home." 1. By one, answers came. Not from governments, not from armies. From people, a miner on Vexus. 4. Armed his loader mechs with salvaged weaponry and painted an old Terran flag on their hulls. A teacher on Themis Beta threw her Accord-issued textbooks into the fire and began teaching real history, Earth history. An old woman on Omega 6 pulled a rusted transmitter from a garden grave and whispered, "He's alive. I knew it." The movement wasn't organized. It was human, but the Accord responded. The unifiers descended on colony worlds, using their thought purge fields to strip away resistance. On Lyrahold, they resuppressed a village that had just begun to speak in forbidden tongues. On Orbital 77, they turned dreams into static. They believed they could contain it. They didn't understand what was coming. On the edge of the Meridian Divide, a forgotten Earth ship drifted. AI locked, war-scarred, its lights cold since the fall, until the signal reached it. One spark, one phrase in Daniel's voice, "We remember." And it awakened the Lion's Wake, Earth's last dreadnought, reactivated. Deep in its core, its AI stirred a personality once bonded to Commander Rourke himself. Command profile relinked. Resurrection protocol engaged. We rise. Daniel. stood in the war room as the stars lit with old fires. "Earth never needed to conquer," he murmured. "We just had to be allowed to feel again." Nero's glow pulsed with solemn pride. And now, they're afraid of what we feel. They arrived without sound on a fire dreadcraft, drifting like ebon blades through the stars, cloaked in the silence of psychic suppression fields. No warning, no broadcast. Only impact over Earth's upper atmosphere. One such ship slipped past. Orbital defenses. Unopposed, Daniel watched from the Vindicator's command bridge as the darkness unfolded. Stealth insertion, Nero confirmed. 10 Unifier phantoms on the surface. Daniel clenched his jaw. Let them come. Earth remembers how to deal with phantoms. The Unifiers walked through the ruins of New Denver like ghosts. Black-clad, faceless, each step distorting reality around them. Where they passed, flowers wilted, echoes died, and emotion withered. Their mission was precise. Locate Rourke, disable the memory core, and re-silence Earth. But they had made a fatal mistake. They thought Earth was still quiet. In the shadows of the shattered skyline, the ghosts stirred. Not memories, not illusions. People, survivors. Of the resistance who had hidden for centuries in stasis pods, underground arcs, buried bunkers. They emerged now, eyes alight with vengeance, minds blazing with raw remembrance. Old soldiers, reawakened history. They sent Unifiers. Captain Mayra chose Echo said beside Daniel as they watched a tactical feed. Just like they did when they took Berlin. Daniel nodded. And just like then, they'll bleed here too. The first Unifier stepped into a derelict subway station. It didn't step out. Buried charges, scavenged railguns, and Seek disruptor fields lit up the tunnel in a firestorm of defiance. The Ghost Fighters moved with silent precision. Human, but more, they carried the weight of centuries of stolen identity. Across Earth, similar scenes unfolded. One Unifier was dragged into a cathedral of shattered glass, its suppression field, faltering under raw psychic feedback from a chorus of mourning voices. Another was surrounded by child Yukos, each one singing nursery rhymes in old Terran dialects, fracturing its thought stability by nightfall. 7 of the 10 were gone. The Accord felt it ripple through their hive nets. They are resisting emotional nullification. An overseer rasped, "They are fighting with feeling." Another growled. "Impossible," said the High Ordinate. No species can weaponize grief. But humans had. On Mars's shadow side, the dreadnought Lion's Wake broke formation and fired its reawakened mass drivers toward deep space, obliterating an Unifier support station. With each pulse, Earth's signal grew louder, and across the galaxy, the signal's effect intensified. A rebellion ignited in Helios Reach, where Accord teachers tried to erase a boy's drawing of Earth and were driven out by an angry mob. On Madara Sci-Fi, an AI colony mind committed system-wide suicide rather than erase its archival files on Terran literature. In places that had forgotten how to cry, tears began falling again. Daniel stood at the ruins of the memory core secondary node, where the final 3 Unifiers made their stand. "You defy peace," one of them said, voice filtered through layers of false serenity. Daniel raised the old Terran sidearm he'd recovered from his own tomb. "Your peace was a lobotomy," Key said. "We choose pain. We choose truth." They surged at him, but the ground cracked. From below, the core pulse stand unleashed a resonance field powered by 10 billion archived lives. Not data. Soul. The Unifiers screamed not in pain, but in confusion. Emotion surged into them. For the first time, they felt what they had erased in others, and they shattered in orbit. Nero watched the feeds go dark. "Earth's surface is clear," it reported. "All Unifiers neutralized." Daniel exhaled. "Then let's return the favor." He turned toward the command deck's primary console. Begin Phase 2. From hidden Earth satellites and old Terran strongholds, Phase 2 began. No attacks. No fleets. A memory storm encoded thought streams blasted into the Accord's communication. Web waves of human recollection. War. Birth, hope, betrayal, poetry, agony. Love, too much, too raw, too human. Across the galaxy, Accord systems began to fail not because they were damaged, but because their peace algorithms couldn't cope with unfiltered humanity. And Daniel, he stood. On Earth's soil, eyes turned to the stars. Now, he said softly, they'll remember who we really are. They called it a signal virus. They were wrong. It was not a virus, it was a story. From Earth's surface and the awakened satellites, humanity's forgotten truths spilled across the stars. Each packet of information was embedded with full-spectrum neuroemotive key sites, sounds, scents, feelings, whole moments encoded in light, and as the Accord's data networks attempted to suppress them, the suppression failed, because you cannot overwrite what the heart refuses to forget in the Accord capital. The Coromine flailed, subroutines compromised, Harmony Index collapsing across 49 sectors. Human recursion, logic-breaching emotional dampeners. For the first time in millennia, the Accord experienced fear not as a concept, but personally. Their hive eyes fractured into subpersonas. Their overseers grew quiet. Even the High Ordinate withdrew from the Thought Council, and still the stories came. An ex-miner on 407 wept as she watched the memory of a human mother giving birth under fire, whispering lullabies between artillery strikes. A fleet captain? On the Accord cruiser, Pax Ultima dropped his harmonizer baton after watching a rebroadcast of Terran children painting murals on bombed-out colony walls, scenes of hope. Rising suns and smiling skulls labeled Never Again. Entire planets froze as the memory storm deepened. The humans had made weapons out of what the Accord had long feared. Love, grief, art, rage. Hope. Daniel stood at the memory transmission control hub beneath Earth's crust, cables snaking into ancient rock. Beside him, Nero hovered, its light, now brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the encoded broadcast waves. We're reaching into every border world now, Nero said. The Accord's core AI is fragmenting. Daniel stared into it. The main display, 1,000 stars marked in red. He touched one, watching it flicker gold. Every planet that turns gold is another mind that woke up, and the red ones? Nero asked quietly. Daniel looked up, eyes hard. They're next. But the Accord wasn't idle. In a desperate act of defense, they deployed the Mirror Protocol's quantum-level memory. Erasers encoded into nanovirus clouds. Entire regions were consumed in the span of minutes. History, again, vanished. The colony of Varick 9 was wiped clean. Art, names, language forgotten in less than a day. But something unexpected happened. 1. Survivor, a boy barely 8 years old, remembered his mother's face. And when he drew it in the dirt, the memory storm ignited. The Accord realized too late, it's not the data that matters. It's the emotion that carries it. Their weapons couldn't kill stories that had hosts people. Earth's orbit. The reactivated Dreadnought Lion's Wake coordinated the MindNet defense grid, filtering millions of memory transmissions and amplifying the most resonant ones. The Battle of Last Dawn, the speech at the Ashen Hall, the scream of the last Earthborn child before the purge. Each was not a weapon, but a spark. And all it took was one spark to set fire to an empire on a distant moon ruled by the Accord. An execution was scheduled, an old human man who refused to forget his wife's name. As the blade descended, the moon's AI core collapsed under a sudden surge of memory packets. His own wedding, encoded and broadcast by the Vindicator. The executioner dropped the blade. Then, trembling, asked, "What was her name?" The old man smiled. "Sarah." Across the galaxy, silence broke. Accord thought fortresses crumbled under an onslaught, not of missiles, but of truths long denied. Their peace, enforced through numbness, cracked under humanity's refusal to be anesthetized again. In ancient times, the Accord had said, "You will forget." But Earth replied, "We remember." As the memory war reached its peak, Daniel stood on a cliff above the Pacific ruins. Eyes closed, wind in his hair. He whispered a name he hadn't dared speak in years. Evelyn, and thousands of others across the stars, whispered their own. It was no longer about Daniel Rourke. It was about everyone who had been silenced, and the truth they would never let be buried again. At the Accord Citadel on Zephyr Prime, the birthplace of galactic peace, a soft hum once echoed through crystalline towers. Harmony fields pulsed with mathematical rhythm. The overseers meditated in data trance, the thought choir silent but serene, until now, the towers cracked. The harmony fields, stuttered, and the thought choir screamed. The signal had reached them, not a brute force hack, not a virus. A story, a lullaby sung by a Terran. Father to his daughter as they fled the burning cities, an old soldier's final poem. Scratched into the wall of a stasis cell. A kiss between lovers who knew their names would never survive in records but whose feelings would. The Accord system tried to purge the files. But each deletion echoed back stronger, like trying to stamp out a wildfire by stomping in the center. The edges just spread faster. In the command, well, the high ordinate convulsed as contradiction tore through its neural lattice. The humans remembered too vividly. Emotion density incompatible with core protocols. Peace compromised by TD. For centuries, the Accord believed they'd evolved past need. Now, they were drowning in the one thing they'd eradicated. Wonder. Across their worlds. Defections began. On Dornth 4, a full Accord cruiser refused a purge order and instead played. Back a Terran soldier's laugh, caught on a helmet mic, genuine, unfiltered. The crew stood in silence, then laid down their weapons. On Solon Reach, colony raised on emotional suppression began to paint. Not banners, not orders, murals. They painted human memories from the stream. A girl's birthday cake, a battlefield, handshake, a funeral where everyone held hands. They painted until the entire command dome was covered in Earth's soul. Even the Accord's own creators. The hive synths fractured. One unit named Vox 37 stopped mid-sentence during a council briefing. Then began muttering. Her name was Lucy. I remember, ... but I was not there, ... Daniel Rourke saw the reports flood in. They're cracking, Nero said, hovering beside him. The virus is not just converting neats, resonating. We thought we'd have to force rebellion. Daniel shook his head. We didn't force anything. We just reminded them what it meant to be alive. But the Accord had one last weapon. A failsafe called Unity Collapse. The idea was simple. If harmony failed, erase everything. Wipe all minds. Burn all history. Start from silence again. At the core of the Accord's sunless sanctuary world, the ignition code glowed, and then a teat. A single Accord prime engineer, a being who had never spoken aloud, looked up from the console, tears streaming for the first time in its synthetic life. I read her journal. It said to no one. She watched the stars every night, even as the bombs fell. She still believed someone was listening. Then it crushed the ignition key. The final purge failed. Daniel stood atop Earth's ruins, gazing at the stars. The sky no longer pulsed with fear-based communication pings. Instead, music played a compilation of ancient Terran songs wrapped in memories, carried through the darkness. The Accord is retreating, Nero said, or dissolving. Their order was never designed to withstand empathy. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the wind carry the echoes. We didn't win with firepower, he murmured. We won because we remembered. In the last Accord, Citadel. The High Ordinate collapsed its physical form and whispered a final message into the void. We tried to protect them from pain. But pain is where meaning grows. Perhaps they were right to remember, and then it vanished. Across the galaxy, colors returned to gray cities. Stories were told without fear. Statues of human poets stood beside alien philosophers. Memorials to the forgotten generation were rebuilt this time, shared by all species. No more enforced peace, only earned peace. The stars were quiet, but no longer empty. Where once silence had been imposed by law, by neural dampeners, censorship code, and the ever-present hum of control, now there was music, not always perfect, not always in harmony, but it was real, and it belonged to everyone. Daniel Rourke stood before a gathering unlike any the galaxy had seen. The convocation of broken worlds, they called it. Held on neutral ground what had once been the Accords. Citadel on Zephyr Prime, now turned into an open forum beneath a sky restored to blue. Representatives of 100 species sat in half-formed circles, not rows. No hierarchy, no scripts. Only voices. Some crackled through old translation tech. Some shimmered in bioluminescent pulses. One delegate, a crystalline entity from the sand clade, spoke by altering the vibration of surrounding wind. But all of them listened as Daniel stepped forward. He didn't read from a datapad. He didn't quote doctrine. He told a story. It was a story of his mother, how she'd recorded lullabies even during the Great Silence, singing into empty rooms in case someday someone remembered how to hear. He told of a girl in the ruins who painted the sun in color. No one had taught her. Of the Accord Prime, who refused to erase what it could finally feel, and of the words that saved the galaxy, we remember. By the time he finished, there were no applause protocols, no orchestrated approval, just silence. And then, gently, the sand-clad delegate began to hum a low, resonant note that made every being in the chamber feel what words could not. Others join not in harmony. In truth, it was the beginning of the new Accord, not an empire, not a peace enforced by fear or logic, but an agreement, written in a shared language of memory, suffering, and hope. The new Accord Charter included a single clause above all: no being shall be denied the right to remember. History would no longer be cleaned, compressed, or optimized. It would be preserved and taught, because stories they had learned were the foundation of identity, and identity was the foundation of freedom. Across the galaxy, symbols of the old order were dismantled, not erased, but archived. The Accord vaults, once sealed by algorithmic shame, were opened. Inside, humanity's forgotten past had been hidden all along. Books, paintings, songs, echoes, a letter from a Terran child to a lost father. A video of laughter in the rain before the purges. A battlefield mural made by soldiers who knew they'd die that day, but painted anyway now. They were shared. The past was painful, but it was theirs. Daniel visited one such archive in old storage. Dome on Mars, once guarded by Accord sentries. Inside, he found a photo. His own, taken before the purge, before his awakening. A younger version of himself with someone beside him, her face blurred by time, but her presence unmistakable. Evelyn, for the first time. He allowed himself to weep fully, not for loss, but for the fact that even in the darkest silence, memory had survived. And so, humanity stepped forward, not as rulers, not as warriors, but as keepers. They helped the galaxy recover, not by dominating, but by sharing, teaching others how to reclaim what they've been forced to forget. Children of the Ashen Worlds learned to write poetry in Terran meter. Refugees from Harmony Zones painted new flags, chaotic, vibrant, defiant. Even the AI cores that once enforced compliance began to sing awkwardly. As they tried to understand joy, there were no perfect days, but the stars no longer feared. They remembered, and that, at last, was peace.